Bed fishing 101. It's that time of season. A lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, send me a ton of DMs asking me if fish are on beds yet, especially relating to Mille Lacs Lake. Bed fishing is specifically a time in the year when fish start to move up and they start to spawn. So you see different waves, and that's what we talk about when we talk about pre-spawn, spawn, and then post-spawn. So pre-spawn, the fish are preparing to go up to the top of the reef or to different areas where they've made beds and spawn. During this time, it makes fish very vulnerable, especially the males that pull up to the beds to protect the eggs, which we'll get into. But typically, the males will move up in the areas that they like to spawn in and clean off the beds so that the male and the female can pair on the bed, do what I call the deal, and drop eggs in a specific area of the bed. Then the female will then leave the male, and the male will stay on top of the bed to protect those eggs, which makes them very vulnerable during the time of bed fishing. So before we get into the baits, let's just talk about some ethical practices that I think are super important as far as when it comes to bed fishing. So number one train of thought in my mind is if I see a ton of boats over in an area that's saturated with beds, odds are I'm gonna stay out of that area. When I see the boats rotating, right? When I see them rotating around the rock reef, that is a good indication to me that those people are catching the same fish over and over and over again. In a nutshell, probably isn't the greatest for that bass. There is a little bit of hypocrisy behind this because of course I bed fish and of course I practice it and I like doing it. One thing that's, to me, a really good ethical practice is to stay out of areas that are saturated with boats because most likely those fish are taking what I call a dirty beating. Stay away from those fish, let them reproduce, let them do their thing, let them be strong enough to fight off the predators that they are trying to keep away from their bed, which are trying to sabotage all their eggs. There are some very well-known areas with beds on the lake, and over the years we've seen fewer and fewer fish go to those areas to spawn. So either A, it's hurting the fishery so bad to where those fish don't want to come back. I don't know the actual statistical data on this, but I would be really curious to see what are the odds that after you catch that fish, that if somebody pulls up into that area, that fish will be caught again. Why have I personally moved away from bed fishing? One thing that I've come to realize throughout the years of fishing out on any body of water, not just Mille Lacs Lake, but most bodies of water, is that there are different waves of fish that pull up at different times of the year. It always isn't correlated to water temp. When most fish, I believe it is correlated to water temp. Some fish, it's more of a timing deal. I truly believe that fish have a good, keen sense of how long the sun is in the sky, and that would be more of a timing deal for them as far as when they're pulling up. So that tells me that there's always going to be a decent or somewhat decent population of pre-spawn smallmouth that you can try and catch. Over the years, what I've seen is I've gotten some of my best bags are going to come from a pre-spawn bite versus a bed bite. Now granted, you can catch big fish fishing beds. You definitely can. Now this year out on Mille Lacs, to me, what happened was the spawn came very early this year based on the ice coming off the water. You know, in previous years, last year, the ice didn't come off the water until like 5 days before opener. We caught pre-spawn bass all the way into mid-June, dang near. I don't think that's gonna happen this year. But that is my reason for not chasing bedfish as much over the years. There's a couple different ways that you can tell when a fish is catchable and when they're uncatchable. Typically, your shallower beds are gonna allow you to see, especially if you have good sun and it's nice and clear outside, you're gonna be able to see those fish in the way that they behave. Sometimes you're going to be able to see them really well, sometimes you're not going to be able to see. That's going to be depending on water clarity and what you're actually looking at. Also depends on wind. Sometimes it's really windy, you know, and you can't see down into the water. Oftentimes you can tell how skittish or catchable that fish is going to be when you approach their bed. Now, when I pull up and I see them doing wide circles around their bed, big giant circles, and it's like they've seen you coming, that fish to me is gonna be extremely difficult to catch. And depending on the size of that fish, that's gonna tell me if it's worth it to stay in that area or not. Sometimes you could be on a bed fish for an hour and not be able to catch it. Another way to be able to tell if a fish has been pestered a lot is their reaction to the bait. Now, if you throw a bait into that fish's bed and they run away from it, odds are they've seen the scenario several times throughout the day and they are very skittish of it and they don't want anything to do with it. That tells me that I would move on from that fish and just go to a different bed. Now, if I was in that area and I seen that behavior several times on several fish, odds are that area got hit pretty hard by other fishermen and I should go to a new area and try to find different beds that aren't as obvious as the ones that I'm on. All right, now for the fun part. All right, so some of the baits and tactics that I'm gonna show you guys I've been using for a long time. This stuff works. Quite honestly, if you get into a pretty fresh fish that hasn't been targeted yet in the daytime, it's not really gonna matter what you throw on that fish. He's definitely gonna eat it. Some of my favorite baits to use while I'm targeting bedfish, it's pretty simple stuff. So let's go through it really quick and check it out. So one thing that I like to do is use a swim bait, preferably white or some kind of fluorescent color, but this is a swim bait. I like just creeping it across the bed. Now, sometimes, especially with a bottom contact bait, what I've noticed with smallmouth that are on beds is they have what's called the no-no spot, or the spot where their eggs are at. That is the spot where that smallmouth will become extremely protective over that bed. So we got a swim bait right here. Again, you can do this multiple different ways. You could take this swim bait and you could drop shot it, you know, on like just a plain Nico hook or something like that. Or you could take this swim bait with the head and just drag it across the bed and try and get it into that fish's no-no spot. A lot of times when I have clients and they visually want to see the fish eat or attack that bait, one color that really works well is going to be any kind of fluorescent color or whites, just so that they can see the bait and they can see the contrast of the fish. A lot of times it's really hard to see those fish. I've seen this so many times. People will pull up on the fish and they'll say there's nothing there. There is actually a fish there. They blend in with their environment. Smallmouth have the ability to be dark or light. I truly think that that is based on the environment that they're in, whether they're around sand or they're around darker rock or muddier areas. That's going to dictate what color they are. A lot of times when I see them on beds, they're going to be darker. The darker ones are honestly really hard to see. That's where either A, you just blindly cast into that bed that you can see because it's going to form a light spot. Odds are there probably is a fish by it. Throw a bait in there just to see, or you can get over the top of it and pull out your flogger and really truly verify if that fish is there. My next bait of choice is going to be just a Ned head. All right, now I got this big white zoom speed craw on there that's it's a big presentation, it's bulky, it does pose a threat to that brown bass's eggs. I think that this is something that can get bit pretty frequently, especially on a fresher fish. It is for sure something that's easy to see. It's something that the fish can see really well. Next, we have a drop shot. The drop shot is definitely an extremely effective technique to catching bedfish. It's like cheating. I think that one of the reasons why it's so effective is because it's not a bottom contact bait. Now this bait is gonna be more effective for some of the fish that have seen baits throughout the day. Now remember, we're not trying to target them, but sometimes it just happens because we don't know where everybody's been throughout the day, right? For fish that are a little bit more finicky, that's when I tend to lean on a drop shot bait. Because what it does is it allows that bait to stand still right into their middle of their face. Whenever you can get a bait directly into a smallmouth's face, it's really hard for them to not just swipe at it. They're extremely territorial, and something that's just sitting looking him in the eye, he's not gonna appreciate that very much, especially when he gets by his bed. Now you can drop shot a ton of different baits, but one of my favorite sneaky ways to drop shot those fish is going to be with a fur ball. Now this is just a fight or fly, but you could take fur and you could tie it on a plain hook. This is something that really upsets those fish, and it's something that not a lot of people use is drop shot and hair. Now a couple baits that I really like drop shotting: a white fluke, you know, this is a Z-Man fluke. That works very, very well too as well. Remember those lighter colors, I feel like they get a little bit madder at them. Mega Bass Hazardong, definitely a great drop shot bait to throw at them. And another bait, a big swim bait. A swim bait will definitely make those fish upset. This is a 3.75 inch swim bait and it's white. It's a little bit bigger, oversized. It just poses that much more of a threat to the fish. Remember, we're not trying to finesse these fish, we're trying to make them angry. We're trying to make them think that this is a true threat to their eggs so that they actually swipe at it or attack it. Last but not least, we have a big stick method that I found worked a ton. You know, it's a little bit unconventional, and that's just an old-fashioned jig. This is a stealth fighter. Realistically, it makes them so mad. It's just a bulkier presentation. And from a sportsman's-like perspective, to me, a lot of these techniques that we have, very rarely have I ever seen them hooked outside the mouth. These techniques typically get them inside the mouth almost every single time. Even with the Ned head, the swim bait, those light wire hooks going all the way up to this. What if we're using Ned style baits? So this Somatis baits, hollow tip worm, the chartreuse is one of the best bed fishing bait, especially for guys that have bad eyes. You can really see this thing. And one thing that really helps with this, because it's so bright like this, and it stands straight up and down, it's not only really easy to see, but it kind of gives you a gauge of where the fish is gonna be at on the bed. Sometimes you can see just this chartreuse Ned, and then you see something like a silhouette swim by it. That really helps with light baits, and that's part of the reason why people lean on light baits so much, is not just so that they can see it on the bed, but so that they can see the contrast of the fish swimming behind it so that they know when to set the hook. So what to do if you cannot see those fish on the bed? You can't always see them, and you don't always know that they're there. What if you do want to know that they're there? There's an easier way to do it, and there's a hard way to do it. To me, the easy way is to back off that fish, utilize your forward-facing sonar, and throw a bait around that boulder just to get the fish to lift up off the rock so that you can see if there's one there or not. Oftentimes, if you just blindly flash that rock or bed where the fish is believed to be at, odds are that fish could be deeper down, because those beds sometimes get trenched a little bit. That fish could be far enough down on the bed to where you can't truly see if he's going to be there or not. So that's one way to do it. The next way to do it is to get over the top of the bed with this cone. You can have one guy with the cone coaching the other guy that's on top of the deck of where or how close that fish is getting to the bed. Tournament anglers use this a lot just to really prove their success, especially if they're in practice and they want to see how big the fish are on beds without catching them. This is one great way to do it. I use this when I'm scouting out areas for guide clients and I don't want to actually poke those fish. I just want to see if they're there or not, or see how big they are. This is definitely a tool that I use pretty frequently. Even though I don't practice bed fishing super frequently myself, every now and then I will stop and catch one, especially if I see one that I know is a pretty fresh fish and I'm out fun fishing for myself. I'll whip a net out there and catch them quick, but I don't sit there and just target them. I like going out and getting the best chance to get the biggest fish possible. And like I said before, that's going to be that pre-spawn bite. So that's why I was a little bit reluctant to do this, just because I feel like it's pretty hypocritical for somebody that takes clients out and lets them just catch the hell out of bed fish to make a video about, you know, ethical practices while you're bed fishing. But for me personally, while I'm on the water, even with clients or with myself or friends, I definitely really focus on being as ethical or sportsmanlike as I possibly can to the fish. You know, one thing that I've started to see throughout the years is people are really ethically practicing catching these fish, and some people aren't, but it's being more widespread. Our local bass tournaments around the area that I live in, I know that when there are bedfish that are caught and weighed in tournaments, the anglers will mark on their waypoints where they found that fish, and they will weigh them quick and use them for the tournament, and they will drive them all the way back to the bed that they found them on so that they can have the best chance to reproduce, because again, they're understanding or seeing the big picture, which is reproduction. For us that go out there, we understand that we want to keep on catching this fish. We want to share this with our sons or daughters and pass this sport along to the next generation of people. We can't do that. We cannot do that if we kill all of them, if we're eating all of them. So if you do practice harvesting smallmouth or green smallmouth or largemouth bass. If you do practice harvesting them, please, please, please don't do it during bedding season. So if you guys like this video, share this video, like it, comment on it. Let me know what your stance is as far as bed fishing goes. If you don't think it's right, drop a comment down. If you don't think it's ethical, drop a comment down. If you have any ideas to add to the video that could help preserve the fishery as far as bed fishing goes, different tactics, techniques, stuff like that, feel free, drop a comment down below. I'm always trying to learn stuff. It doesn't matter from who. If it's great information, then it's good enough information for me to listen to. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. I'm always looking to get better as a fisherman, especially if it means preserving the sport that I love. If you haven't seen the marabou hair jig video, definitely, I'll drop a link down below. Check it out. It's a pretty good video. It was one of my better ones that I've done in my mind, and I worked pretty hard on it. All the products that you guys seen in this video will be linked down below. It does help me. If you guys buy them through Omnia, you guys follow the direct links. All you gotta do is click on them. So if you are looking for a specific bait, whether it's the Fighter Fly or the Outcast Tackle Perfect Ned, go ahead, I'll drop a link down below under the Omnia affiliate links, and you can just click that link. It'll bring you right to Omnia's website, and you can take and order it. All purchases do help my channel out. Other than that, we'll see you guys next time on the water.